There are over 99 different ways a goblin speaks, but only one noise as generic as this one.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Many people have been asking me when I'm going to do another Conquering Your Commander, and I've always answered, I don't know. At least, I didn't know until Josh Lee Kwai and Olivia Gobert-Hicks previewed the following card on the Command Zone podcast, September 17th, 2018. That's right, this is Etrata the Silencer. Now, if you're anything like me, you've been rejoicing with the survey and different Dimir cards that we've been getting thanks to Guilds of Ravnica that don't purely revolve around mill. Etrata is just one of those very cards, and a legendary creature, which means that she can be our commander to boot. For 2 colorless, a blue and a black, we get a legendary creature vampire assassin with 3 power and 5 toughness. She also has the line, Etrata, the Silencer can't be blocked, which is fantastic. More importantly though, is her combat damage effect. It reads, whenever Etrata deals combat damage to a player, exile target creature that player controls and put a hit counter on that card. That player loses the game if they own 3 or more exiled cards with hit counters on them. And finally, Etrata's owner shuffles Etrata into their library. What really excites me about this card is that it's finally a commander that can win without doing combat damage, milling your opponents out, or some kind of combo, and it's a different kind of win condition, which is fun. It does require your opponent to have 3 creatures which aren't tokens, which is a bit unfortunate if you're going up against a control matchup that runs very few creatures, but that's part of playing EDH. You never know what your opponents are going to play either. If you're going to build this deck, you're going to build heavily around her ability, which means you have to plan for the downside of her shuffling herself into your library or you putting her back to your command zone. Each of these situations is not ideal, as going to the command zone has her costing more and more and more, and putting her into your library can often make it very difficult to find your commander again, unless you're running like a million tutors. So ideally what we want to do is run cards that'll allow us to bypass or downplay the negative side of this ability. So let's look at some cards to help us win the game with Etrata. Right off the bat, let's dismiss any idea of running double strike cards in this deck. Unfortunately, her ability will trigger and resolve first with the first strike damage before even moving to the regular combat damage, meaning you're not going to get that second hit, and therefore you're not going to be able to exile that second creature. That doesn't mean that there isn't more than one way to be able to exile more than one creature in a combat step. Enter Strionic Resonator. For only 2 colorless and tapping the artifact, we're able to copy Etrata's ability, allowing us to exile 2 creatures in one combat step, thus putting us 2/3 of the way of taking our opponent out of the game. Unfortunately, getting an opponent 66% of the way there can often lead to them targeting us to take us out before getting them 100% of the way. This is why I'd recommend running Voltaic Key and Rings of Brighthearth. With the Voltaic Key, we'll need to have access to 5 colorless mana, as we need to pay for the Strionic Resonator, then the key, then the Resonator again. While not as universally useful as Rings of Brighthearth when it comes to copying activated abilities, the Voltaic Key can offer us a budgetary option when you compare it to the price of Rings of Brighthearth when it comes to buying the card. On the whole, Rings will allow you to do the exact same combo, but for 1 colorless less, as you only have to pay 2 colorless to copy the Strionic Resonator ability with the Rings ability. The only downside with Rings of Brighthearth and Strionic Resonator is that Etrata will ultimately shuffle herself into your library, which is never great. This means you have to be either very lucky to redraw into her, or use a tutor spell to go and find her. You could always consider running Isochron Scepter and exiling Vampiric Tutor underneath it. It's an expensive way of recasting your commander, as it's going to cost you 2 life and the next card you'd be drawing, but I've seen weirder plays in EDH anyway. Dominaria brought with it one of the strongest cards that I've seen in a long time, and Helm the Host would fit in perfectly for this deck. 9 colorless mana is a pretty huge investment, but it also means that we never shuffle our commander into our library or put her back into our command zone, and then not care as the token gets exiled as it shuffles itself into our library. Obviously you'll need to protect her, so running a few counterspells, especially in blue, makes perfect sense. Other ways of saving you the hassle of having to bring her back from the command zone or shuffle her into your library are cards like Crystal Shard and Erratic Portal. For 1 blue or for 1 colorless, we're able to respond to Etrata's ability and bounce her back to our hand, allowing us to recast her in our second main phase and hopefully swing with her the next turn. While having to recast our commander over and over again isn't ideal, it's better than having to recast it with a commander tax, or cast a tutor spell to find it and then recast it. I would recommend running cards like Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Haul the Bandit Lord in that case. Once your opponents know what you're trying to do with Etrata, she'll never be safe from removal again, and having to wait a whole turn around the table is opening yourself up to have your commander eat a ton of removal. By having the Greaves, Boots, or the Hall of Bandit Lord, you're able to recast your commander the next turn and swing again without having to wait. You can then bounce her back to your hand and rinse and repeat, knowing fully well that your opponents are going to have to respond to your commander at instant speed, and even then you can be ready with counterspells or what have you. Another way to get around Etrata's ability is to flicker her by using cards like Illusionist Stratagem, Ghostly Flicker, and Displace, blinking your commander and having a return. By resolving one of these, Etrata becomes a new instance of herself, which means that the old trigger which you've responded to will not force you to shuffle her into your library or make you put her to the command zone. Along these lines, you can also run the boogeyman of EDH, Deadeye Navigator, and I'm actually going to go on the record and say this is probably the most fair case of ever using this card. This means for 1 colorless and 1 blue, you can respond to your trigger, flicker your commander, and then be ready for the next combat step. One mechanic I'm not too keen on, mostly because it's kind of confusing and I don't use it very often, is phasing. I believe if you put an aura like Vanishing on Etrata, you're able to pay for the activation cost of the aura, phasing your commander out, and thus have another way to get around the shuffle trigger. I'm not 100% certain on this, so maybe check with a judge online or in your local community before running this card. Last but not least, and probably my favorite way to deal with Etrata's ability, is ninjutsu. There was actually a fantastic thread on the competitive EDH Reddit thread, which talked about ways of using your cleanup step to get around effects that lasted until end of turn and basically allowed you to abuse the step. Now I'm not trying to say that you can wait until the end of turn to resolve the ability, but you can abuse the combat step much like Reconnaissance does. Surprisingly enough, ninjutsu doesn't care what step of the combat step you're in, just so long as you return an attacking creature that's been unblocked back to your hand. This means you'll be able to respond to Etrata's ability by using ninjutsu to bring in something like Ink Eyes, Ninja of the Deep Hours, or Sakashima Student, and swap your commander for the ninja, and then much like you would with the Crystal Shard or Erratic Portal, bring her back out again the next turn and swing. And in the absolute worst case scenario, Command Beacon is probably a land you want to include in your deck. I can't envision any good reason that you put your commander into your library, so in most cases I can see Etrata going to the command zone. Command Beacon will offer us a way of not having to spend a billion mana to be able to recast her over and over again, and a card like Crucible of Worlds will make sure that Command Beacon is always accessible. Anyway gang, I hope you enjoyed this Conquering Your Commander. I think it's like the first one I've made in almost a year. I'm really excited for a lot of cards coming out of Guilds of Ravnica, and I hope to get a bunch of them on camera. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.